A man's decision to choose 5 orphan girls over his wife shatters his marriage, but 25 years later, that choice changes the world. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavier than silence. Gregory Walsh sat alone at the small dining table, the soft ticking of the wall clock marking each passing second like a reminder he hadn't asked for. 65 years old. The candles on the single cupcake in front of him burned steadily, untouched, their tiny flames reflected in his tired eyes. No phone calls, no laughter from the hallway, no hurried footsteps, no surprise knock at the door, just quiet. He glanced at his phone once more, even though he already knew what he would see. No messages from his wife, no calls from Courtney, nothing from the house that had once been full of voices, arguments, celebrations, and noise. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Gregory slowly stood and walked toward the living room. The old wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as if the house itself was sighing with him. He stopped in front of the mantelpiece, where 5 framed photographs stood in a neat line. 5 young women, 5 smiles, 5 stories that had rewritten his life. He picked up the first frame with careful hands. Tessa, standing in a graduation gown, chin lifted with quiet strength. Next to her, Melanie, holding a book of poetry, eyes thoughtful and proud. Quinn, grinning beside a machine she had built with her own hands. Rosalind, frozen mid-performance under bright stage lights. And little Imani. No, not little anymore. Laughing on a soccer field, joy written across her face. They all remembered, Gregory whispered softly. His biological children hadn't called. His wife hadn't even sent a message. But these five never forgot. He sat down slowly on the couch, the weight of memory settling around him. He remembered how this house once echoed with arguments instead of silence. How his birthday dinners used to feel tense, divided, carefully polite. How love had slowly stopped flowing in certain directions. Was it really worth everything I lost? The question lingered in the air, heavy but honest. Gregory leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He didn't feel bitter. There was sadness, yes, but also something steadier beneath it. A quiet certainty. The kind that only comes after years of standing by a choice when it would have been easier to walk away. Then, just as the clock's hands slid into midnight, his phone vibrated. Once, then again, then again. Gregory's eyes opened. A video notification lit up the screen. Group call. 5 names. His breath caught as he pressed play. 5 familiar faces filled the screen, laughing, smiling, leaning into one another just like they always had. Different cities, different lives. One bond. Happy birthday, Dad. They sang, their voices slightly out of sync, completely perfect. Tears welled before Gregory could stop them. He laughed softly through the emotion, pressing a hand to his mouth as the years seemed to fold in on themselves. The loneliness of the evening cracked open, replaced by warmth. Real, undeniable warmth. In that moment, sitting alone in a quiet house, Gregory knew something with absolute clarity. Family is not who stays because they have to, it's who stays because they choose to. And sometimes, choosing love once changes everything forever. The rain hadn't stopped since the funeral. It tapped softly against the windows as Gregory sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at an envelope that looked far too small to hold the weight pressing on his chest. His younger brother Philip was gone, taken in a sudden car accident that still didn't feel real. One moment he was alive, laughing, talking about his volunteer work. The next, he was a name spoken in past tense. The house felt different without Philip's presence in the world. Quieter, emptier. Gregory ran his thumb along the edge of the envelope. It was creased and slightly stained, the handwriting uneven, as if written by a hand that already knew time was running out. His name was written across the front in ink that had bled just a little. He took a slow breath and opened it. Inside was a folded letter, the paper worn thin in places. As he began to read, Philip's voice filled his mind, gentle and steady, the same way it always had been. If anything happens to me, the letter began, there are 5 girls I need you to check on. Gregory swallowed. Philip wrote about the orphanage. About the girls he mentored every week. 5 names followed: Tessa, Melanie, Quinn, Rosalind, and Imani. He described them not as cases or problems, but as children with fears, hopes, and quiet strength. Sisters in every way except blood. They have no one else, Philip had written. If I'm gone, the system will scatter them. Different homes, different cities, different lives. Gregory's hands trembled slightly as he read on. I know this is too much to ask. I know you have your own family, your own responsibilities. But you have room in your heart, brother. You always have. Please don't let them disappear. Gregory leaned back in his chair, the words blurring as his eyes filled with tears. The rain outside seemed louder now, matching the ache in his chest. Philip had never been dramatic. If he wrote this, it meant he was desperate. 5 girls, 5 lives hanging in the balance. Why would you trust me with something this big? Gregory thought. He remembered Philip coming home late from the orphanage, tired but smiling. How he spoke about those girls with pride. How his eyes lit up when he talked about their small victories. Gregory had admired him for that, his ability to give without expecting anything back. Now that responsibility sat squarely on Gregory's shoulders. Could he really step into that role? Could he protect 5 broken hearts from being broken all over again? And at what cost to his own family? He folded the letter slowly and pressed it to his chest. The pain of losing his brother mixed with something else, something heavier. A sense that this was no longer just a request, but a calling. Was this how lives changed forever? Through one quiet letter and one impossible choice? Gregory stood and walked to the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Somewhere out there were 5 girls who didn't know their future was slipping away. 5 girls who trusted Philip, and now unknowingly trusted him. He closed his eyes. In that moment, grief turned into resolve. Because when someone you love asks you to protect what matters most to them, saying no is not really an option. Sometimes, love doesn't ask politely, it demands courage. The evening light spilled softly through the living room windows as Gregory stood near the doorway, the folded letter still in his hand. His wife, Margaret, sat on the couch flipping through a magazine, her expression calm, almost bored. The house smelled of dinner and routine. Familiar, safe, untouched by the storm gathering in Gregory's chest. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Margaret looked up, already impatient. Can it wait? I've had a long day. Gregory shook his head.
Non.
It can't. He sat across from her and explained everything.
Philippes accident.
The letter, the 5 orphan girls. He spoke slowly, choosing each word with care, hoping she would hear not just the facts, but the heart behind them. First, Margaret said nothing. Then she laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that cut through the room. 5 girls? She repeated. You want to bring 5 strangers into this house? They're not strangers, Gregory replied softly. They're children who have no one left. Margaret stood abruptly, the magazine falling to the floor. And what about us? She snapped. What about our children? Our money? Our future? Her voice rose with every word, anger mixing with fear. She began pacing the room, counting invisible numbers on her fingers. School fees, food, clothes, medical bills, space, reputation. Do you have any idea what this will cost us? She demanded. Do you want to ruin everything we've built for people who aren't even related to you? Gregory's heart pounded. He had expected concern, maybe hesitation, but this was something else. They're just kids, he said. They'll be separated if no one steps in. Margaret stopped pacing and looked straight at him, her eyes cold and unyielding. That is not our problem. The words landed like a slap. Gregory felt something shift inside him, something fragile cracking under pressure. He loved his wife. He had built a life with her. But in that moment he saw a line being drawn, clear, sharp, and final. You're choosing them over your own family, Margaret said, her voice low now, dangerous. If you do this, don't expect me to pretend everything is fine. The room fell silent. How did love turn into a battlefield? Gregory stared at the floor, the letter burning in his pocket like a living thing. He thought of Philip's handwriting, of 5 girls who didn't know they were about to lose the only stability they had left. He thought of his own children, sleeping down the hall, unaware that their father was standing at the edge of a life-altering decision. "I'm not choosing against you," he said finally. "I'm choosing to do what's right." Margaret's face hardened. "Then choose," she said flatly. "Them or us." "No shouting. No tears." Just an ultimatum, delivered with chilling calm. Gregory looked at her, searching for softness, for understanding, for any sign that this was still a conversation. There was none. In that moment he realized something painful and true. Love that demands you abandon your humanity is not love at all. The orphanage smelled of old books, disinfectant, and quiet endurance. Gregory stepped inside slowly, his footsteps echoing down the narrow hallway, as if announcing his presence to a place that had learned not to expect much from adults. A kind-faced woman led him to the common room. "They're in there," she said softly. "They don't trust easily." Gregory nodded. He understood that already. Through the open doorway he saw them. 5 girls sat close together on a worn couch, their shoulders almost touching, as if space itself were a threat. They were different ages, different faces, but something invisible tied them tightly as one. When they noticed Gregory, their conversation stopped at once. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Tessa, the oldest, straightened slightly, her jaw set in quiet defiance. She placed herself just a little in front of the others, a shield without armor. Melanie clutched a book to her chest, fingers tense, ready to pull away. Quinn watched him carefully, calculating, searching for weakness. Rosalind stared at the floor, her foot tapping nervously, while Amani held Rosalind's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Gregory felt his chest tighten. These weren't just children. They were survivors. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to their level, careful not to rush the moment. "My name is Gregory," he said gently. "I knew your mentor, Philip." At the sound of that name, something changed. Amani's eyes filled instantly. Rosalind's tapping foot stilled. Even Tessa's guarded posture softened just a fraction. "He used to come every week," Melanie whispered, her voice barely there. "He said he wouldn't leave us." Gregory swallowed hard. "He didn't," he said. "He trusted me to check on you." Silence settled again, heavier this time. Quinn broke it. "They're sending us away," she said flatly. "Different places. They told us already." Tessa lifted her chin. "We won't go," she said, fierce and trembling all at once. "If they separate us, it's over." Gregory saw it then, what paperwork and policies could never show. These girls had already lost their parents. They had lost stability. They had lost the only adult who showed up without being paid to care. What they had left was each other. If I let them be separated, I would be breaking them a second time. Gregory looked at their linked hands, the way they leaned inward instead of apart. He imagined 5 different homes, 5 different beds, 5 different nights of crying into pillows with no one to hear. How could anyone call that protection? "I don't have all the answers yet," Gregory said carefully. "But I want you to know something." The girls leaned in despite themselves. "I see you," he continued, "and I know that whatever happens, you belong together." Tessa's eyes shimmered. Amani bit her lip to keep from crying. For the first time since he entered the room, hope flickered, small, fragile, but alive. As Gregory stood to leave, he felt the weight of the choice before him more clearly than ever. These girls were not asking for comfort. They were asking not to be torn apart. And some bonds, once formed in survival, must never be broken. The front door opened slowly, as if the house itself was unsure about what was about to change. 5 small suitcases lined the entryway, scuffed and uneven, carrying everything the girls owned in the world. Gregory stood beside them, offering a gentle smile that tried to hide his own fear. For the girls, this was not just a new house. It was a test of whether hope could survive one more time. Margaret watched from the kitchen. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She didn't even step forward to greet them. The silence was louder than shouting. "Your rooms are upstairs," Gregory said softly, gesturing toward the staircase. "We'll take things one day at a time." Tessa nodded, her eyes scanning every corner, measuring safety. Melanie stayed close to Quinn. Rosalind lingered near the door, as if ready to run. Imani held her small suitcase like a shield. As they climbed the stairs, Margaret turned away. From that moment on, the house split in two. At dinner, Margaret served food without looking at the girls. Plates were placed on the table, but no questions were asked. No names were spoken. When Imani whispered "thank you," Margaret did not respond. The biological children noticed everything. Courtney watched her mother closely, learning how to mirror the cold. Michael, older and quieter, stayed neutral at first. His eyes filled with confusion rather than anger. The air at the table felt tight, as if one wrong word could shatter it completely. Gregory tried to hold the center. He checked homework. He fixed broken drawers. He told the girls stories before bed and made sure the lights stayed on in the hallway at night. He told himself this distance was temporary. If I just stay patient, maybe she will soften. But days turned into weeks. The girls learned where they were not welcome. They stopped entering the kitchen when Margaret was there. They spoke in whispers. Laughter became something done only behind closed doors. Even their footsteps grew lighter, careful not to be noticed. One evening, Gregory overheard Courtney whisper, "They don't belong here." The words cut deeper than any argument. Tessa heard it too. She said nothing, but that night she tucked the younger girls into bed with practiced calm, humming softly like someone far too familiar with fear. Gregory stood in the hallway, listening, his chest aching. Was saving 5 children worth breaking the family he already had? Downstairs, Margaret sat alone in the living room, the television playing to no one. Upstairs, 5 girls clung to one another, pretending not to feel unwanted. In between stood Gregory, pulled in opposite directions, holding responsibility like a weight that never rested. The house still looked the same from the outside. Same walls, same roof, same address. But inside, love had been divided into rooms. And when a home refuses to make space for compassion, it slowly forgets what family means. Gregory learned quickly that love is not proven by one brave decision, but by hundreds of quiet ones made when no one is watching. Every morning began the same way. He packed lunches with careful notes tucked inside. Simple words, small reminders that someone cared. He checked backpacks for unfinished homework. He waited in the driveway until all 5 girls walked safely through the school gates, even when they pretended not to notice. Inside the house, Margaret moved like a distant shadow. She passed the girls in the hallway without acknowledgement. If they spoke, she did not answer. If they cried, she closed her door. Gregory became everything else. He sat beside Melanie during panic attacks, counting breaths until her hands stopped shaking. He stayed up late helping Quinn with difficult math problems, even when his own eyes burned with exhaustion. When Rosalind woke from nightmares, he sat on the edge of her bed until sleep returned. When Imani asked, in a small trembling voice, if he would leave too, Gregory pulled her close and held her until the fear loosened its grip. "I will not disappear," he promised silently, over and over again. Tessa watched all of this with guarded eyes. She never asked for help. She never cried in front of him. But Gregory noticed the way she lingered near doorways, listening. The way she relaxed just a little when she realized he was still there. Some days were harder than others. There were school meetings where teachers spoke in careful tones about adjustment issues. There were evenings when the girls flinched at raised voices, even when the voices weren't angry. There were moments when Gregory felt stretched thin, torn between patience and heartbreak. How do you heal wounds that were never allowed to close? Margaret's silence grew heavier with time. She stopped sitting at the dinner table altogether. When Gregory spoke about the girls' achievements, she changed the subject. The house no longer felt like shared space. It felt like territory divided by invisible lines. Still, Gregory chose them. He chose them when Quinn slammed her door in anger. He chose them when Melanie failed a test and cried in shame. He chose them when Tessa finally broke down one night, whispering, "I don't know how to be a kid anymore." Gregory didn't try to fix everything. He listened. He stayed. He showed up the next day and the day after that and the one after that too. Love, he learned, was not loud. It was steady. And while Margaret turned away, the girls slowly turned toward him, trust growing in careful inches. They stopped asking if he would leave. They started asking what time dinner would be. In choosing them every single day, Gregory gave them something they had never had before. A reason to believe tomorrow could be safe. The air was thick with years of tension. The silence in the house louder than any argument could have been. Gregory stood in the living room, the 5 girls clustered behind him like fragile shields, and Margaret's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. "They don't belong here," she said, her tone cold, final. "I've tolerated them for long enough. You have to choose me or them." Gregory felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, heavier than any he had carried before. How can love demand that you abandon those who need you most? He wondered, gripping the edge of the mantel. The girls looked at him with wide eyes. They had grown to rely on him, not just for safety, but for belief that the world could be kind. And now, their world was balancing on the edge of a choice he would never regret making. "I will not send them away," Gregory said, his voice steady but soft. "They are my responsibility, and I love them." Margaret's face twisted with fury and disbelief. "You're throwing away everything, me, our home, your life, for strangers." "No, not strangers," Gregory thought. "They are my family now." He could see the shock in her eyes, the realization dawning that he had finally drawn his line in the sand. All the silent battles, the nights of quiet resistance, the love he had shown in endless, unseen ways. It led to this moment. The girls took small steps forward, sensing the finality of the decision. Melanie reached for his hand, and Tessa rested her head on his shoulder. It was a gesture that spoke louder than any words. They had chosen him, just as he had chosen them. Margaret's shoulders slumped as the fight left her. There was no more anger left, only the cold understanding that the marriage she had once controlled had ended. Gregory did not gloat. He did not savor the victory. He simply looked at the girls, at the 5 fragile, brave souls who had become his heart outside of himself. Could love truly cost so much? He asked himself silently, and yet he did not hesitate. He signed the papers later that week. Alone in his office, he read the words with calm clarity. The marriage, years of compromises, resentments, and silent battles. It was over, but the girls were safe. The girls were home, and as he watched them play in the garden, laughing and free, he understood something he had always known in the quiet corners of his heart. Family is chosen, not imposed. Sometimes love asks you to let go of one life so another can live. And in that choice, Gregory found peace. The years had passed like a river, carrying the girls from fragile, frightened children into strong, confident women. Each step they took was a testament to resilience, every achievement a quiet victory over a past that had once threatened to define them. Gregory watched from the sidelines, sometimes from a distance, sometimes close enough to feel their laughter ripple through the house that had become their sanctuary. Melanie had become a teacher, shaping young minds with the same patience and care Gregory had shown her. Tessa ran a small clinic in their community, offering healing to those who had nowhere else to turn. The others had found their own paths, artists, engineers, counselors, but all shared the same heart, a determination to lift others as they had been lifted. Gregory's eyes filled with tears one evening as he watched them gather for a dinner in the backyard. The same girls who had once clung to each other in fear now carried themselves with grace, confidence, and power. Their laughter was louder, freer, a symphony of triumph over years of neglect, pain, and doubt. Did I truly make the right choice all those years ago? He wondered silently. The answer, he knew, was visible in every confident smile, every gentle act of kindness they offered the world. He remembered the moments of quiet despair, the nights Margaret had demanded he give up these girls, the tears he had held back to be strong for them. Every sacrifice, every lonely day of resistance, had led to this proof that love, when chosen with courage, multiplies rather than diminishes. One of the women, now a successful social worker, approached him with a small gift, a handmade frame with a quote, "You believed in us when no one else would." She placed it in his hands, and Gregory felt the weight of decades melt into a warm, unshakable pride. The girls, now women, stood together, hand in hand, looking at the man who had given them a life beyond what they had imagined. And Gregory realized that family was never about blood alone. It was about love, choice, and unwavering dedication. Could one act of courage truly change the course of so many lives? He mused, and as he looked at them, he knew it could. He smiled, quietly, to himself, heart full. The girls had become everything they were told they couldn't be, and in watching them, he had found his own joy renewed. The moral lingered in the warm night air, simple and true. The love you choose to give can create miracles that last a lifetime. The morning sun spilled softly through the curtains of Gregory's quiet house. But today, the silence felt different, expectant, almost electric. It was his 65th birthday, yet the usual emptiness that had haunted so many previous celebrations was replaced with whispers of excitement and laughter echoing from the living room. He stepped cautiously into the bright space, only to be met with a sight that made his heart pause. All 5 of the girls, now fully grown women, stood before him, their eyes sparkling, their smiles wide. Behind them, a banner read, "Thank you, our father of choice." But that was only the beginning. One by one, they spoke, revealing a legacy project that would change the lives of countless orphan children. An entire community center, classrooms, and scholarships built in Gregory's name. A place where love, care, and opportunity would be guaranteed, just as he had given them. Could a single life ever truly make this much difference? He wondered, his voice caught in his throat. He remembered the lonely nights, the tears held back, the sacrifices made, each moment culminating in this very instant. The women walked him through the blueprints, photographs, and letters from children whose futures had already been touched. Gregory's eyes brimmed with tears as he listened, each story echoing the love he had poured into these girls all those years ago. He saw in them the lives he had saved, the hearts he had lifted, and the hope he had refused to let die. All those sacrifices, were they really worth it? He thought quietly, almost to himself. The answer was undeniable, written in the faces of these women and the lives they were now shaping. Crowds gathered outside, reporters, neighbors, and the very children who would benefit from the orphanage's new chapter. As the cameras flashed and the world learned of Gregory's courage, something shifted in him, something he hadn't felt in decades. The world at last understood. The quiet man who had chosen love over convenience, who had risked everything for 5 orphan girls, had changed lives far beyond his own walls. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift, replaced by a profound, unshakable joy. The daughters held his hands, each one whispering gratitude, each one embodying the choice he had made so long ago. The man who had once celebrated birthdays alone now stood surrounded by the proof of a life lived with courage and heart. The moral was clear, simple, and undeniable. True love and sacrifice can echo far beyond what the eyes can see, touching lives the world will never forget.